Here's a FOX News special report.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and address each one of these verdict forms separately. The first verdict form I have is the State of Georgia versus Travis McMichael. Mr. McMichael, please stand. Verdict is as follows. In the Superior Court of Glenn County, State of Georgia, the State of Georgia versus Travis McMichael, case number CR 000433. Jury verdict form. Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. I'm going to ask that whoever just made an outburst be removed from the court, please. As this court has indicated, I ask that there be no outbursts in the court, and I expect as much from the gallery. Please respect the court's desire for this as we move forward. If you feel like you need to make a comment or otherwise demonstrate with respect to the verdict, I do ask that you step out of the courtroom now. Count 2, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 3, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 4, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 5, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 6, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 7, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 8, false imprisonment. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 9, criminal attempt to commit a felony. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Dated this 24th day of November, 2021, signed by the foreperson. Have a seat. As to Gregory McMichael. In the Superior Court of Glenn County, the State of Georgia versus Greg McMichael, case number CR 2000433. Jury verdict form. Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, not guilty. Count 2, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 3, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 4, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 5, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 6, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 7, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 8, false imprisonment. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 9, criminal attempt to commit a felony. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. This 24th day of November, 2021, signed by the foreperson. As to William R. Bryan. In the Superior Court of Glenn County, State of Georgia, State of Georgia versus William R. Bryan, case number CR 2000433. Jury verdict form. Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, William R. Bryan, not guilty. Count 2, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, William R. Bryan, not guilty. Count 3, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, William R. Bryan, guilty. Count 4, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, William R. Bryan, guilty. Count 5, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, William R. Bryan, guilty. Count 6, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant, William R. Bryan, not guilty. Count 7, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant, William R. Bryan, guilty. Count 8, false imprisonment. We, the jury, find the defendant, William R. Bryan, guilty. Count 9, criminal attempt to commit a felony. We, the jury, find the defendant, William R. Bryan, guilty. Signed this 24th day of November by the foreperson. Go ahead and have a seat. Court having read the verdicts and accepted the verdicts, anything from the state?
No, Your Honor, nothing from the state.
Anything from the defense?
We ask the jury be polled, Your Honor.
All defendants ask the jury be polled? All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask each of you individually a set of 2 questions with respect to the verdicts that I have just read. If you could please respond when you hear your juror number. Juror number 1, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, sir.
Juror number 2, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, sir.
I think, I can't. Okay, 2. Juror number 3, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes.
Juror number 4, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, sir.
Juror number 5, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 7, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 8, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 9, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 10, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 11, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 12, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, Your Honor.
And juror 16, you have heard the verdicts read. Were these your verdicts then, and are these your verdicts now?
Yes, sir.
The jury has been polled. Anything further from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
From Greg McMichael?
No, Your Honor.
From Mr. Bryan?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, what that means with the court having accepted your verdict is that your role in this case is now at an end. What we're going to do today is I'm going to have all of you, the panel and the 3 alternates, go ahead and retire into the jury room. I'm going to address a couple matters logistically with you in the jury room once we get done here. But before we do that, and before I excuse you, I do want to thank you publicly for your service here in Glynn County. It has been a long trial, and I appreciate the fact that you have been attentive. You've listened to the evidence. And that is what we ask in this court. It's a very simple ask in a very complex way. So it's appreciated. When we all got together, I say we all got together, when we got together at different times, I said that I was going to thank you a number of times and how I was going to tell you I do truly appreciate your time here. Hopefully you understand why I said that when we started. I do also hope that you got a little bit of an insight into what goes on in a trial and maybe understand a little bit more of how important it is for members of our community to come down and be part of this process and serve as jurors in this community. So again, thank you for that service. And I'll come address you all in just a moment. You're excused.
All right, for the jury.
Okay, after 2 days of deliberations, the jurors there have come to a verdict in this case. Travis McMichael, the first one read aloud there by the judge. This is Arbery's mother, I'm being told.
All right, it is this court's usual.
Arbery's mother was sitting in the courtroom reacting very emotionally as all of this was read. Travis McMichael, the news at the very top, the man who fatally shot Ahmaud Arbery, was convicted of murder and found guilty on all counts against him. Jonathan Turley was joining us ahead of this coverage. The verdict has now been reached. You've been listening along with us. Jonathan Turley, your reaction as Travis McMichael found guilty of malice murder, while Gregory McMichael was found not guilty of that charge, as well as William Roddy Bryan.
You know, this is the expected result, given the weight of the evidence and the power of the videotape. The prosecutors alleged a series of lesser offenses, including aggravated assault, false imprisonment. The reason for that is those were the linchpins to get felony murder. It turns out that that was a very important tactic for the prosecution, because the jury did find those lesser offenses, and once they did, since they're felonies, you can be found guilty of murder if you participated in that underlying crime and it resulted in the death of Mr. Arbery. And so they ended up having sweeping convictions. There was a little bit different array of charges, but they all impact the same way on these defendants. They're all looking at life imprisonment.
Yeah, and it's a great question, because I was wondering, Professor, as they were reading these charges, how you had Travis McMichael, who was guilty of malice murder. He was guilty all the way across the board. But then you had Gregory McMichael, not guilty of malice murder, guilty of felony. And then you go on to Roddy Bryan, who was not guilty of malice murder, not guilty of the first count of felony murder, and then guilty on the second count. And why? What played into it being the second count of felony murder?
Well, this was a belt and suspenders prosecution. They put up charges for each insular lesser offense. So you had aggravated assault, not just with the shotgun, but also with the truck. You had false imprisonment by cutting off Arbery. And so basically the prosecution was spreading its bets. They only needed to nail one of those lesser offenses to have the predicate felony, to get felony murder. And that paid off for the prosecution. It turns out the jury did not accept some of those lesser offenses, but they only needed one. And the result is really quite complete for the prosecution. I mean, they ran the table. They got convictions on all three men. Bryan was the most difficult one. You know, he was at a distance from the shooting, and he videotaped. He was the person who videotaped the ultimate shooting. His defense counsel took a rather curious approach. He suggested that his client had been brought to the scene by, quote, providence, making it sound like it was God's hand that he followed them and filmed the scene. The jury clearly did not think that he was there as God's messenger, because he's convicted just with these other two of murder claims, murder counts.
Just want to take in the scene there outside the courthouse in Brunswick, Georgia, where there were preparations underway for quite some time ahead of the verdict being read after just 2 days of deliberations. They're seeing a celebration there. Just a moment ago, we were showing images of what we were told was Arbery's family members, because his mother was quite clearly in the courtroom, Jonathan. The camera was on her for quite some time. She's been very outspoken during the course of this trial. At points, I had to remind myself of her words, saying, "I let them dehumanize my son." She spoke out, Ahmaud Arbery's mother. She reacted to one of the attorneys in the courtroom saying that that attorney was beyond rude in the things that that attorney was saying about her son. But she appeared quite emotional at times, looking like, nodding in agreement to the verdict being read. And Jonathan, we're just taking in the scenes outside the courthouse here.
Yeah, I agreed with her view of what the defense counsel said. There was a reference to the fact that her son had dirty toenails, and it was viewed by many as a racist comment, but it was certainly gratuitous if it wasn't racist, and it took her breath literally away. You could hear her gasp in the courtroom. And many of us were really astounded by that statement. But you can imagine what it's like to be a parent to see your son chased down by trucks and ultimately resulting, of course, in his death. And so what I think is going to happen now is the defense is going to appeal some of the rulings by the judge. The judge delivered a real haymaker right before closing arguments on what is required to show a citizen's arrest. And among other things, he said that he believed that a citizen's arrest required you to witness it or to respond immediately to this type of crime. He adopted a very narrow definition of that. I expect they'll be challenging that. They may also challenge the definitions for things like false imprisonment. But it's very difficult to reverse this type of case. There are very interesting analogies you could draw to the Trayvon Martin shooting. In there, George Zimmerman said that he also followed a suspect who turned on him and tried to grab his gun. The difference, as you know, is there was no videotape. And so there were two witnesses to that shooting, and one of them was dead. The only one that survived was a defendant who was able to give testimony. This shows the power of videotape. And by the way, so does Rittenhouse. That case turned much on the videotape. We remain a visual species. Videotapes are viewed as something that doesn't lie. And I'm not surprised that this jury, like the Rittenhouse jury, wanted to see that video again.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. Professor, stand by if you would, because, we talk about the videotape here. We should note when the professor says that Roddy Bryan said, it was divine intervention that brought him around to bring his cell phone up and start videotaping that. That was part of the defense. And we want to bring in former D.C. detective, defense attorney, and Fox News contributor Ted Williams. And Ted, that really was the whole thing, is that Roddy Bryan turned around and he started videotaping that on the cell phone. And that's how we have this videotape that the jury wanted to see again and again. The prosecutor said this. She said, quoting, "This isn't the Wild West. If you are going to take the law into your own hands, you better know the law." In other words, saying, if you are going to make a citizen's arrest, you had better make sure that you knew this person was breaking the law. The contempt from the prosecution was he was jogging, and the defense saying he was burglarizing some of these local homes. They never proved that. And so that was a big piece of this, Ted, is that if you're going to make a citizen's arrest and you're going to, imprison somebody with your truck, you better know exactly what you're doing.
Absolutely. What we saw in this case, and one of the issues that we in this society are very sensitive about, is the issue of race. And race was front and center in this case, because the prosecution's position was that this was a young black kid that was out jogging and had not done anything that would permit even for a citizen's arrest. The defense in this case, their position was that that the jury should draw an inference, because he had been in this one house on several occasions and had been seen on videotape, that in and of itself was enough for them to make a citizen's arrest. But I'd like to say something here. I am a lawyer, and I can tell you, I am very, very embarrassed by the manner in which several defense attorneys put on their case, and it may very well have hurt them and their clients with a jury. When you give a closing argument and you talk about a dead man's dirty, long black toenails, that in and of itself is very offensive. When you stand up and you tell a judge that there are black pastors in the room and that you don't want them there, that also was very offensive. And I think, sadly, that jurors or at some stage during their closing argument may have picked up on some of this, and it may very well have been very injurious to their clients. And I got to tell you, just jogging, and all we had was a black kid jogging in the neighborhood, and he hadn't committed any crime. And by the way, I was thinking, they kept saying that they believe that he had committed some burglaries. But this kid was jogging. He didn't have a car. He didn't have a knapsack on him. He didn't have anything on him to show that he could have taken anything of substance out of any of these homes. It is a very sad period, but we also must look at the jury system. I know that there were a lot of people in the black community that was deeply concerned as to whether a predominantly white jury in Georgia would convict 2 white men. And I got to tell you, when you look at the way the defense played this case out, they consistently and kept trying to pull on the sensitivity that, hey, there's crime in your neighborhood. Hey, black people commit crimes. They pulled out every one of the racial insensitivities that they could without clearly using the word race. And that went against them. It hurt. There were fair-minded white people. The majority of this jury was white. There were fair-minded white people who took a look at this case and they made an independent decision. And so what we as Americans should be proud of in this verdict or these verdicts is that American citizens working together, and irrespective of this race thing, that they could come together and that they could make a decision based and predicated on the evidence that was presented to them.
Ted, we continue to take in these live pictures there since the verdict has been read there, live in Brunswick, Georgia, just several minutes ago, as the courthouse will begin to empty. We do expect that possibly we could hear from maybe the defense attorneys or the prosecution. All 3 defendants, if you're just tuning in, have been found guilty of murder in the Ahmaud Arbery death there in Brunswick, Georgia. Ted, we're sort of taking in these live images because ahead of the verdict being read, there were preparations made and underway by businesses there to prepare for this verdict, no matter the outcome. And it seems there's celebrations there on the steps of the courthouse.
The fact that 3 men, 3 citizens of a community have now lost their freedom, to me, that's nothing to celebrate. On the other hand, you have individuals, specifically black individuals in that community, who have seen for years black citizens injured, maimed, or killed, and they have seen individuals gotten away with it. You go back and you look at like the Emmett Till situation where Emmett Till was killed allegedly for whistling at a white woman. Those individuals were found not guilty. That in itself is what people have looked at. But what we've seen here again is fair-minded people, fair-minded Americans, fair-minded jurors.
This has been a Fox News Special Report.